After Effects now, and I'm going to import the graphics that I've made. I've got the two versions of the photographs of me. I've got a thin smoke movie here that I'm going to use for a bit of texture. This is from the mitchmartinez.com website. There's a lot of really good free stock footage here, flames, light elements, all sorts of things that are really useful for motion graphics designers. I've also got a paper still image, which is reasonably high resolution, and I'm going to use this for a bit of extra texture. I've got a landscape I'm going to use that I'm going to color correct. So let's pull these together. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create this landscape or image inside a silhouette, and then I'll start adding elements on top of that. So let's bring all these bits in. Just going to select all of these and deselect the ones that I don't want. I'm going to make a new composition, and I'm going to use the HDTV 1080-25 preset, which is full HD, 1920 by 1080, 25 frames a second, and I'll just make this just about 10 seconds long for a starter. I can always change that later if I need to. Okay, so the first thing I want is my landscape, so let's drag and drop that in here. And I want to cut it out with a silhouette of me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this black and white version, and I'm going to use it as a track matte in After Effects. So I'm going to drag this on top of my landscape background. Now this is a still image, it's quite high resolution, it's over 4,000 pixels wide, so I'm going to hit S for scale and just scale this down, and I'm going to position it. I'll leave it centered pretty much where it is, and I'm just going to change the scale so that I can show off easily how this is going to work. So what I need to do, now that I've got this black and white image sitting on top of the landscape, is I want to tell After Effects to use these black and white values to stencil out the landscape image. And the way that we do that is by using track mattes. Now the track mattes are visible next to your landscape image or next to any layer that you've got here. If you don't see this track matte section here, click on the toggle switches and modes button. This will switch you between your anti-aliasing and your motion blur and things like that. It'll switch you between that setting and your track matte setting in your blend modes. If I come to my landscape now and come to track matte, it says none. If I click on this, I've got four options. I've got alpha matte and luma matte, and each one of those has an inverted option. What this means is that with the alpha matte, the transparency values of the layer above will be used on our landscape. Now this doesn't have any transparency values, it's all visible. The luma matte means the black and white values of this image, or this layer above, they will be used to control the transparency of my landscape. So I'm going to use a luma matte because I'm dealing with black and white values. So I'm going to click on this top one here. Now what this has done is used the white background to show the landscape and cut out where the black part, where I'm standing visible against that whiteboard. Now that's the inverse of what I want. If I look at my image, I want my landscape inside the silhouette, not outside. So I want the inverted luma matte. So that's the first stage there. I've got my landscape inside my silhouette. Now because I'm dealing with still images here and not movies, if I want to, I can move this around a little bit. I can't move it too far, otherwise my image starts to create holes, which I don't want. But I can shift this around a little bit and use the parts of the image that I want. This is looking pretty good. I will leave this about here. So that's the first part made. The next thing I want to do is I want to have the white background of my original image still in there. So I'm going to take the black and white version of me, sorry, not the color version of me, sorry, and I'm going to drop it in behind. Now, as we can see here, these images don't match up. The background doesn't match up with our stenciled foreground now because I've scaled the background. So what I can do is I can check the scale on my black and white image. It's 43%. If I go to my background, hit S for scale, type in 43, return. Now that fits on there. I can just check that by turning that layer on and off. Now if I had moved this black and white image around, I would need to move this one the same amount. So I could select this layer, hit P for position, get the position values, and copy P for position and paste them onto there if I needed to. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep everything where it is. So now I've got this image just creating the white background. I've got my landscape image on top, which is being track matted out with this Luma matte from the black and white image. So that's getting part way there. If we have a look back at our reference, here's this image sitting in the middle, but we can actually see that it fades out and back into some of the foreground elements again of the character. So we need another version of me colored sitting over the top of this. And again, I need to make sure that scale matches between these images. So all of these images of all these different versions of me are all sitting in the same place. And what I'm going to use here is I'm going to use a shape mask to cut out part of the center of this and reveal me around the landscape. So I'm going to make sure, this is important, I'm going to make sure this top layer that is me here, I'm going to make sure this is selected. I'm going to grab my rectangular shape tool. If you click and hold this button down, you can pick the different shapes. I'm going to choose the rectangular shape, and I'm going to click and drag a large rectangular shape that extends out the sides of my composition and covers the middle of my graphics there. And as you can see, as I draw that, I've now masked this top layer so that I'm visible inside the mask, and outside I'm seeing these layers below. Now this is the opposite from what I'm really looking for. Again, if we look at the reference image, I want the details of the character visible at the top and maybe slightly at the bottom there as well. So this mask it's the wrong way around, it's inverted. So what I need to do is come to my mask that I've just drawn and invert it. The next thing I can do now is, rather than have this sharp edge, I want a soft edge. So if I open up my options for this mask, we have a feather value. I can click and drag on the feather. Oops. And as you can see there, it's just softening off that edge now. So this mask blends into the photograph of myself there. I can do a really soft, large blend, or I can make this number a little smaller and have a much smaller blend. I'm going to leave mine somewhere about there, I think. Okay, so we're getting a bit closer. We've got our general stenciled graphic layers set up here. So now the next part, looking at the reference, is to create maybe a little texture and also work on the color correction. There's also a few clever things that we can do with some blurring. Part of this image is blurred out. We can look at how to do that in the next step.